Celebration 2023. How's everybody doing tonight? Smugglers, Gangsters, the Scum and Villainy through the years. First of all, I want to acknowledge any Star Wars Underworld cosplayers. Stand on up. Special bounty hunter that's going to be standing behind us, a Dengar. Come on up. So, yes, all celebration, a lot of Star Wars is about the Force, is about the rebellion versus the Empire, good versus evil, but there's always been a fringe element. Scum and Villainy, these characters that have been in the underworld, these characters make so much of what Star Wars is to this day. A lot of us sitting in this room have a lot of fond memories of these different characters that have affected us through our lives. But we're going to get into it. First, we have some guests to introduce. I have sitting next to me Dominic Jones from the Star Wars Underworld Network. I also have Ethan Sachs, writer of ongoing bounty hunter comics over at Marvel. I have Matt Booker, co-owner of Fantha Tracks. And I have Ciaran Duggan, also from the Star Wars Underworld Podcast Network. We also have somebody that's running a little bit late that will be joining us shortly. But we're going to go around the room so far, and we'll start with Ciaran about one of your best memories or first memories of the Star Wars Underworld, the fringe element, how that has affected you, what interests you about that.
Hey everyone. I'm very nervous, but I'm excited to be here. Yeah, the Star Wars Underworld, for me, I started when I was about 16 years old. I'm 28 now. And I just, on the hoof, started listening to the podcast. I really enjoyed it.
Ciaran, he's not talking about us. He's talking about the actual underworld, the scum and villainy of the...
Everyone wants to hear about us, don't they?
Yeah.
Oh, dang it. My ego's got too big there.
Quick interjection. We have sitting with us Adam Christopher, New York Times best-selling author of Star Wars Shadow of the Sith.
To go back to me. Okay, so this is my first ever panel, so this is going to be atrocious. I'm just going to say that. But my favourite character from the Underworld has been Cad Bane. That was probably my first real introduction to being like, okay, there's some really cool characters in this franchise. And when I was watching the Clone Wars for the first time, he was just so cold and calculated. That first episode, Hostage Crisis, it just really set the tone for me. And the fact that he's still cropping up in shows like The Bad Batch and The Book of Boba Fett just tells me like he's had a real lasting impact. And yeah, he just looks really cool as well. I have to say, when I go around the floor, there are so many amazing costumes, but that one stands out. And yeah, I've managed to see loads of just like fantastic costumes like Cad Bane, Boba Fett, The Mandalorian. So, anyone who's coming here dressed up as in one of those characters, well done, because it looks like... And Dengar. Because it clearly looks like it takes a lot of effort. So, yeah, bravo everyone.
There's been so much influence, as we see through the characters we're going to talk about today, of the Old West. Cad Bane got the big trench coat, just that attitude. So we see that coming up a lot with the Scum and Villainy through the years. What about you, Matt?
For me, it was probably the vintage Star Wars comics, and then I rediscovered Star Wars in 93, 94, got back into it. Started doing conventions then, did like the second or third of a UK convention, and met Jerry Bullock. And nicest guy there ever was at the convention. You ever met him? Hands up if you ever met Jerry Bullock. Good few of you. I ended up working with him for many years, dressing him in costume for events, dressed him for the Black Series launch. Used to dress him up in his costume the fans made him, the Dead Comic guys. And yeah, Fett was just it for me. So when Phantom Menace came out, I stopped collecting everything Star Wars and just went focused on Boba Fett. And I got a lot of stuff. Yeah, a house, a living room, study, a loft full of Boba Fett stuff. Just classic Fett, but yeah, just Fett. Started writing Fantha Tracks and some guys, and yeah, just write about Star Wars every day, online since like 96, 97, in early days, and then yeah, not stop loving it. 10th celebration, love it, love the fandom, love the friends in it. and Bounty Hunters are the best.
Yeah, I would imagine Boba Fett is definitely a lot of people's favorite kind of gateway into what we're talking about today. What about you, Adam? What is a big memory for you? What kind of got you started really kind of digging into this era of the Star Wars universe?
You know, because I'm an original trilogy guy, I'm at the right age for it, and for me, Empire Strikes Back was like the ultimate cinematic experience for a 7-year-old. It was the bounty hunter scene, which like is a total cliche, but like this was this weird moment in Star Wars where you have characters that are on the screen for 5 seconds, or less even, and yet you've got action figures, you've got names, and for me, at that age, what I was doing, I was like watching Doctor Who and writing Doctor Who fan fiction, and I was watching Star Wars and I was playing with Star Wars action figures. That was like my creative kind of outlet, and it was the bounty hunters from Empire Strikes Back, especially Zuckuss. Now the original toys got the name wrong. There's Zuckuss and Forlorn. So Forlorn was a droid, like an insectoid, and Zuckuss is kind of like an insectoid alien guy, right? But the toys got it wrong, and they labelled the toy for Forlorn Zuckuss. So to me, that's still Zuckuss, right? So those two were like this kind of weird insectoid thing, unlike anything we'd seen in Star Wars before or since at that time. And like the adventures that I had with my action figures, constructing whole backstories about the bounty hunters.
Oh yeah. I mean, when we didn't have access to on-demand television to watch movies or anything like that, that's how we continued the adventures. Myself the same way, playing with my little Dengar action figure, reenacting scenes with Dash Rendar and a bunch of cool figures like G88, all those guys, that's how we kind of got creative. It was something that I feel like today, it's not happening as much with technology and everything else, but yeah, very much so. What about you, Ethan?
Well, I wish my 7-year-old self got to play with 7-year-old Adam, because the same way that just short sequence in Empire Strikes Back being in the movie theater at that age, and the one that really caught my eye.
Yes! I mean, next to Dengar, of course. But just seeing this lizard man just sort of tilting his head and in this menacing way.
I'm gonna take this off because I don't think. But I just, something clicked in my brain, and now all these years later, I get to write them, which is just amazing. I get to write a lot of those classic characters. So somewhere in space and time, the 7-year-old me is spontaneously combust, and eventually I'll blink out of existence. So yeah, those classic characters are my gateway in.
Fantastic. Dominic?
For me, like Ciaran, Clone Wars is such a foundational memory for me that the character Hondo Ohnaka has really come to signify the underworld for me, and I just love his spirit, his joviality, and his willingness to stab you in the back if it will get you a quick buck. So just a character that, you know, sometimes these underworld characters seem very serious and they're very scary and they're very threatening, and Hondo can definitely be that, but he'll also do it with a smile and a joke, and I love that about him. So yeah, Hondo Ohnaka.
Yeah, I didn't put the word pirates in the title, but we certainly have a lot of characters just like him in Star Wars. By the way, I never introduced myself. My name's Chris. I am a content creator on YouTube for the Starrapter YouTube Channel. I also do a podcast called Outer Rim Transmission. When it comes to what got me into Star Wars was actually Return of the Jedi, which is great because we're here celebrating the 40th year anniversary for it. Just over my buddy's house, I was probably 4 or 5. The earliest memory I had is of Jabba the Hutt. And I was both terrified but also intrigued by all this menagerie of these creatures and these characters that were mentioned are on screen for all of like 3, 4, 5 seconds, but the fact that my imagination was being able to, okay, I can, you know, put this together and be like, okay, these characters are doing this over here. Like, I want to learn more of these characters. What were their backstories? So yeah, Return of the Jedi, just getting into Jabba's palace, and then obviously Maz Kanata's TNT. We're going to go into locations and stuff later on in this panel. But first, I want to dive into some of the current creators that are dealing with the very thing we're talking about tonight. I'm going to go over to Ethan, who's, as I said, is writing the Marvel comics. First off, can you tell us a little bit about the creative process of like how you even like pick the characters you're writing about? Because you're dealing with such a a large amount of characters in between Empire and between Return of the Jedi. There's so much good stuff to dig into with that.
Well, the editor who's like in charge of the Star Wars line at Marvel, Mark Panizzi, approached me, and I had done a few Star Wars books at that time, including like a Rise of Skywalker prequel and a Galaxy's Edge book, and he had this vision for a ongoing bounty hunters that would sort of be through. It was starting out as Caleb Valance, who's for those of you who don't know, is a cyborg bounty hunter who was introduced in the original Marvel run way back in '78, I think it was. Yeah, so
Pre-Terminator.
yeah, pre-Terminator. I want to stress that because we do get that a lot, and to sort of be the point of view character. And then we definitely wanted to have the classic bounty hunter sort of coming in and out of the series, and then somewhere along the way, it sort of morphed into a crew. And so where we are now is Valance is with Bosk and Dengar, not Dengar, I'm sorry. There's too much coolness in one book, you know. Because Dengar would eclipse everyone else. So
Dengar needs his own ongoing series, I would think.
Yes.
Can you take that one back to Marvel?
I will try. And Zuckus and Forloan, and so it was just kind of became a team book, became like an ensemble, which I like. And what I love about them in writing this particular corner of the galaxy is I kind of feel like most of the sort of the Star Wars saga is this huge battle for the fate of the galaxy, and these are the people that are just, you know, not looking up. They're sort of on the grimy streets, and they're just trying to survive and make their way. And I just love that about them. I love that corner, that dark back alley corner.
Yeah, and you also created really rich new characters like Tonga and Losha. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, I mean it's been kind of fun, and it's surreal to add new characters to Star Wars lore. And the great thing about this franchise, and I'm assuming you feel the same way, where everything connects to everything else. So the books and the comics and the movies and the TV and even Galaxy's Edge, the place, all those stories are part of this puzzle pieces in this larger, you know, picture. And so it's been kind of cool to have my babies, you know. So Tonga and Losha are a married couple, and they basically bounty hunt together. But they sort of helped form this crew. So it's kind of nice to have them alongside Bosk, who again exploded my 7-year-old self. It's a cool job.
Excellent. Going over to you, Adam. So you are dealing with a very interesting character in Shadow of the Sith. We have this character named Ochia Bestoon, first appeared in Rise of Skywalker. This character starts off in that book kind of like in a seedy kind of cantina. So from a certain perspective, this character, as we know, is a Sith assassin, but they also seem to be skirting the edge of the underworld a little bit. So do you want to talk about that whole process of what you did with the character there to enrich his story through that book?
Yeah, Ochia Bestoon is an interesting character because, you know, we see him in the Rise of Skywalker for all of like 1 second even. There's more of him in the behind the scenes making of documentary than there is in the movie. And then in the movie you see his face, but in the documentary you actually see him kind of messed up. But he appeared then in the Darth Vader comic by Greg Pak, which is set between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, I think, where basically Greg created this incredible character who, like he's a Sith assassin. He was employed during the Clone Wars to hunt down Jedi. And yet when you see him in the Vader comic, he's this kind of walking disaster, crazy, slightly like idiotic, but his own worst enemy kind of thing. Completely not what you would be expecting from the kind of very imposing figure that you see in Rise of Skywalker for 1 second. I had the advantage in Shadow of the Sith where, because the book is set, I think, 17 years after Return of the Jedi, I could take what Greg had done in the Vader comic with Ochi and still have my own version of Ochi, because like as you say, we first meet him in a junkyard. He's kind of made himself a hermit on this kind of junkyard moon. And he gets the call from Palpatine's kind of disembodied voice to go hunt Rey, and then he goes to the cantina. So like, he's in a different place to where we see him in the comics. And you're right, in that he's kind of like, he's a Sith assassin. He's not Sith, he's a Sith assassin. But he skirts the underworld, and the first thing he does in Shadow of the Sith is like, he needs to get his old crew back, so there's, there's Boss Marga and Serensko, who are kind of big idiots in here. But he's using the underworld and mercenaries and bounty hunters and pirates, the Droid Crush pirates of Festoon, which goes horribly wrong for him. But yeah, he's a really cool kind of history character.
Yeah, especially since you mentioned that about skirting both edges of the kind of there. But you have a character from Clone Wars, besides Ventress. You see her journey start off as the apprentice of Dooku, and by the end of that series, she's also a bounty hunter. So it's not unheard of to have these characters, and especially her, a force-wielding character in that respect. Ciaran, what did you think about that whole process? Because you're a huge fan of the Clone Wars. Do you have anything to say about it?
Yeah, as you were talking, the other character that stood out was Maul as well, and how they both seem to take similar journeys, like on the dark side of the Sith, and then they both go towards the mercenary bounty hunter route. And I like Asajj Ventress, I mean, she's a very complicated character, and like when one looks at her journey, I mean, to be honest, when I first watched the Clone Wars, I wasn't that engaged with that character, It was just very kind of like traditional Sith type villain. But then when the Night Sisters arc took place in the Clone Wars, it really just like expanded her story, and it was fascinating to see. I actually kind of felt sorry for her, like her father figure in a way in Dooku had abandoned her, and it was like her whole life had just been shattered, And then when we look at season 4 and then she goes down the bounty hunter route, it's like, wow, she's just like so expendable by that point, Like Boba Fett and Boss are like outranking her basically, even though she's got lightsabers and he's a force wielder, And yeah, that whole scene, like the kidnapping scene stuff later on in the bounty episodes in season 4, and then she kind of, she has choices to make, and like when I look at that, the later story of the book with Quentin Voss, it's really tragic. I think her story is completely tragic, and when I compare that to say Maul, for instance, I feel like with Maul, he was always really ruthless, like despite when he became that kind of head of the Shadow Collective. Whereas I felt with Asajj Ventress, there was more of a redeemable qualities in her character. I was watching recently when Maul's got Dryden Voss, and then the Pikes, and then Black Sun, and he's ready to let all of them go. That's kind of the impression I'm getting. Even he's playing the Pikes against all the other players of the Shadow Collective in the season 7 series. Whereas Asajj Ventress, I don't know, I kind of felt like she had a really sad story, and thankfully, actually, no, I don't know where I'm going with this. All I'm going to say is that, just watch the Clone Wars again. I mean, actually, the more you're talking about it, I want to watch those episodes again.
Yeah, so speaking of organizations, you mentioned the Shadow Collective. There's a lot of really rich, kind of seedy organizations. Ethan, you're dealing with one of them currently, sort of, with the Crimson Dawn. Coming into it from Solo, we're really establishing this as a big power of the entire Star Wars Underworld, fronted by Ciaran. You want to tell us a little bit more about currently what's kind of going on, the mindset of how's that interacting, how's this Underworld element actually being a big part of the Rebels, the Empire, all that?
So, right now in the comics, we just finished these 3 massive crossovers that interconnected, so it's like a trilogy of crossovers. That at the center of it was Ciaran Crimson Dawn, and it really is testimony to Charles Soule, who crafted the story, and the entire story started where he basically came up with the what if ideas, like what if, because there was all this time that you had between when Han Solo was put into Carbonite and when we see him on the wall at Jabba's palace. And so what if on the way to Jabba's palace, Boba Fett loses, or the Carbonite's stolen? and like who would be brazen enough and calculate enough to outwit Boba Fett and the ant. Like I was talking about this earlier, where basically we're at the summit, creative summit with Lucasfilm and Marvel in I think it was like 2019 or so, and he had this thing where somebody is going to be under a hood, and the last panel, the last splash page, you're going to reveal, and it's going to be someone special. So he wanted Kira from from Solo, who had it was the shocking reveal at the end of that movie that she was working with Darth Maul for Crimson Dawn, and we weren't sure if we would get her. And I think the Plan B, which never happened, would be Cat Bane. But Kira, it was perfect, because you have the next time that Kira and Solo reunited, it was over a slab of carbonite. So that kind of morphed into this incredible chance for the other writers on the line to get to do sort of where their characters fit in this massive, because what Kira does is she instigates basically a syndicate war to distract the Emperor, because she has plans upon plans, and so we really got to dive into this underworld, like pitting different syndicates against each other. And obviously I'm biased, but I recommend picking up. They put together trades, so War of the Bounty Hunters, Crimson Reign, and Hidden Empire, which just wrapped up last week. So that's something we get to explore, and obviously because I have bounty hunters, they get thrown into the mix too.
I'm just in awe that he pitched that in 2019. That's such a. I'm always amazed by the long lead time you guys have, and like that's a year after that.
Oh, he's remarkable to work with, full stop. And I just think he had this incredible, high concept idea, and it became something really special for all of us, because all the characters are affected by it's like the first domino, and then this massive crash of dominoes, bloody dominoes.
Yeah, we have an entire feature film, Solo. Any fans of Solo in the room here? Yeah, Matt, what do you think it is about Solo that really finds that people can dig their claws into that movie?
It was, Rogue One was quite sad and a down movie. It was brilliant, it was a down movie. Solo was a character we all knew and wanted to know more about, and they gave us so much of that story. It was really good, fun film. I think I saw it 6 times in the cinema, maybe 7, and just wonderful. You had bounty hunters in there, you had lots of the underworld, you had fights in it and everything, and just a good, fun movie. We saw Kessel, we saw Spice Wines with the Kessel Run. We saw good stuff that we'd all heard about from the old bits of dialogue here and there, and they brought it together absolutely beautiful.
Oh yeah, there's just a sly reference that, I pushed R's thing off the cliff, no big deal.
Yeah, loads of it. And they brought in Master Terrakati, which was fantastic.
Oh, big deep cut
Yeah.
for those of you that played that original PlayStation game back in the 90s.
I haven't played that video game against you guys who played quite also. Because why not?
Adam, what do you think is so special about Tatooine, and why so many of our stories, including recently Mandalorian and everything that came between them, what is it with Tatooine that is always, we think of Tatooine as that's the planet where all the bounty hunters and all that scum is?
I don't know that we can answer that question. It's like, why is Tatooine so important? It's like, well, okay, so it's original, right? This is the center of the, as far as we know, the original movie, like the hive of Scum and Villainy, Mos Eisley. And it made such an impression on people at the time, it still does, that whenever we think of Tatooine, we think of kind of deserts, and it's this kind of weird, arid climate with this kind of grimy, slimy cantina type thing. It's where people would go to hide and conduct their nefarious dealings, whether it's out of sight of the Empire or out of sight of the New Republic. And like, it's classic, and I loved it in the book of Boba Fett. We go back to Tatooine, obviously, quite a bit, and we have the mods who are riding these scooters, and then suddenly it makes sense to me, because like in this kind of terribly bleak, monochrome almost world, we then have these kind of young people who like are putting all their effort into making shiny scooters and things and modifying themselves. as a way to escape the kind of what is actually a terrible place to live. Like, you wouldn't want to live on Tatooine. This all level of fear seems to want to make it a nice place. Like it's killed, right?
Yeah, another popular location that we love talking about, first introduced in the Clone Wars, I believe, but there was this video game way back then, Star Wars 1313, eventually got retrofitted to be like, oh, that was going to be a video game about the origin of Boba Fett. You were going to go around, kind of like how the Mandalorian Season 1 was, Boba Fett would get a piece of armor here, get a weapon there, as he goes through. Dominic, what do you think it is about just that atmosphere of level 1313 that also brings in the bounty hunters, smugglers, gangsters, pirates, all those guys?
Yeah, I mean, Star Wars 1313, the game, is just sort of one of the great tragedies of Star Wars, that it never got finished, it never got made. It just looked so cool and so enticing at the time, and unfortunately just, realities of the industry and life got in the way. But as a location, and it's one that, like I said, we've gone back to in Clone Wars and places like that. Coruscant's fascinating because up there on the top levels are all the most powerful people in the galaxy, or the people that think they're the most powerful people in the galaxy. You have the senators, and you have the people who influence them with their campaign donations and all that stuff. You have all the rich a-holes of the galaxy, and then you keep going down, and then that's where the real people are. And then you keep going down lower and lower, and power invites people who are corrupt, and that invites the bounty hunters. That invites the people who are looking for a quick buck, who don't really have a moral code, or if they do, they're willing to put it aside in service of doing a job. And so you have this wonderful juxtaposition of all these people in their ivory towers up high, living this high life, with all these people living in squalor on the lower levels, and the bounty hunters, those characters that kind of venture in between and can kind of walk in both worlds. We see that with Cad Bane in Clone Wars and other characters. And you get this nice back and forth between the worlds, and I think 1313, those lower levels of Coruscant, just are a nice home for it.
Yeah, and you have this really cool kind of cyberpunk, dystopian kind of atmosphere. The smoke, the neon lights, that kind of invites like, okay, this is the seedy area of the Star Wars galaxy. What about you, Ciaran? What do you think about 1313, Coruscant in general? What about urban city plans? I mean, because Coruscant isn't the only one. We have Nar Shaddaa, that is also kind of like the Las Vegas of the Star Wars galaxy. Legends, the Hutts run this casinos and everything else there.
I'm sad that I've never been to Las Vegas, but there's that great scene in the Clone Wars in the episode Lethal Trackdown when Plo Koon and Ahsoka Tano go down to the depths of Coruscant, and kind of get the impression that the Jedi are just kind of, they're not that interested in what's going on in the criminal underworld by the time the Clone Wars, because they're quite busy, to be fair, fighting a galactic war against the Sith, or a civil war, I should say. But there's that great scene they go in the bar, and it's really beautifully lit. It's a beautiful scene. All the people in that bar care about is money, basically, like that. And that, for me, sums up the bounty hunters. All of it is it's just a job for them. It doesn't matter what lengths they go to get that. And what reason I brought up Cad Bane in the past is because, for me, he's kind of on that extreme end. Like, he just, he'll be hired by a Sith. He was hired by Darth Sidious to kidnap young children, basically. And then later on he was hired by the Kaminoans to also, kidnap Omega. And then also to break Zero the Hutt out of the Republic prison. And for him it's just like, I think there's that great line in Evil Plans where it's like, I'll take on any job for the right price. And when I look at Coruscant, it's not a surprise that, in that episode, Jango Fett, they said Jango Fett spent a lot of his time hanging around that area. And it's just, because it's so secluded from the rest of, Coruscant is a planet I just find fascinating, because there are so many different levels to it, I get used to it being kind of the Senate and the politics and the rich people, but it's not just that. It's like our society, basically. There's just so many different aspects to it, and I don't know where bounty hunters are in our era.
Yeah.
I hasten to, I don't know that answer, but
They're called clock.
but yeah, I just want to say I love the imagination of Star Wars, and I think what I love with Clone Wars in particular, and why I'm such a prequel fan, is just it really expanded my imagination growing up as a fan. And I love the original films, but the visual effects, I think, have been so incredible. And in the Clone Wars, they just got better and better and better. Now we look at Bad Batch and the quality that they're producing. And it's not even just, there's the visual element, but I think it's the story as well. For example, that Cad Bane episode of Hostage Crisis, they managed to make a prequel out of that, Evil Plans. Okay, maybe it wasn't the most interesting thing to look at R2 going in the spa. But, in the sequel, we got to go to Mount Hutter and look at the huts, and the huts themselves, I mean, they're the nefarious, the bounty hunters, aren't they, really? They're the ones who are hiring them to do all of this stuff. And, yeah, basically. And Zero, that voice, it always makes me laugh. It's a great voice.
Yeah, Huts get a bad rap. I mean, we don't really see any benevolent Huts in the galaxy that I can think of. They're always painted in a poor state, unfortunately. Big thing with bounty hunters, smugglers, all those characters that we're talking about today. For me, what sticks out to them is their arsenal, or specifically their ships. I feel like their ships have the best designs in all of Star Wars. Obviously, Slave One, just that cool vertical take up. We see exactly how it works down in Book of Boba Fett and Mandalorian, which is really sweet. But I want to just kind of go down the line here and just, hey, what if our favorite ships here? Mine is going to be the Outrider. I mean, Shadows of the Empire just hit me in the right place at the right time as a kid. Figures, the video game, so having that analogous kind of Millennium Falcon, but a little bit sleeker, was something that I very much enjoyed. What about you, Dominic?
I'm going to give the obvious answer and say the Millennium Falcon. Because, this panel is called Smugglers, Bounty Hunters, and everything. And we forget sometimes that Han Solo started off in the underworld, and the Millennium Falcon was used for smuggling and for, basically human trafficking at times. So, really, very much an underworld ship, and even though it's become a symbol of hope and the rebellion and the resistance and all that, it's still very much at home in the underworld. So, going with the Millennium Falcon.
Yep. I mean, I feel like it's the second most obvious answer, but I just love the design of Boba Fett's fire spray, no longer Slave One type. Just the dynamic of how it can rotate. It looks cool from any angle. And a close second for me would be the Mist Hunter, which is Zuckuss and just because I envision it full of noxious gas that Zuckuss can breathe okay. I kind of like this idea, almost like a Cheech and Chong movie where you just look at the cockpit opens and then comes out. But that's headcanon, it's not official.
I'm going to pick the Razor Crest, because the Razor Crest is a really good design. It's super practical. It's definitely a utility ship for a bounty hunter, because even at the beginning of The Mandalorian in Season 1, you've got the compartments where you can keep all those carbon-freeze bounties, and it's got a bathroom, and it's got it's clearly designed for a good purpose. And it's funny, the episode where he gets destroyed is called A Tragedy.
Very much remember.
Well, the kid is shaking also.
It is, it's the RV, it's the RV, it's Star Wars well.
Yeah.
Which is kind of annoying in a way, because now he's got the Starflyer, British expression, in one. That is not a bounty hunter's ship.
No.
Because it's fast, and it's a sports car kind of thing, it's all souped up, but where do you put stuff?
Where's the bathroom?
Where's the bathroom? And Grogu has to sit on his lap all the time. Now that they've got,
It's a midlife crisis car, isn't it?
it is. It's cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, the best person. Maybe I'll buy the Lego set to compensate my destroyed emotions.
I've got to say, one of mine is just the best. Slave One is just absolutely exquisite, and also the ship design is beautiful. And the noises, Jango Fett's version of it, which I think pretty much the same one, but it's never explained, really. But, bombs it dropped, that noise to anybody when it came back in Mando, it dropped that bomb, and we were like, oh, that's the noise. that's the noise. That bomb dropped, and it's just fantastic. It's got all the arsenal, all the weapons. and it can do anything.
Ciaran?
Initially, I was really hoping you weren't going to pick me, because I was like, I can't think of another ship other than the Millennium Falcon and Slave One. And then I remembered in Solo, Dryden Voss's yachts, which actually is really cool, and I wish I had one, to be honest. But no, it was actually a really cool design, and I love the music score as well when that ship first appears in the film.
It was basically a cantina in space.
Yeah,
Basically, yeah.
a really posh one.
It is. And it's quite menacing as well, you know, it's the sort of thing that I wouldn't want that thing to be chasing me either. But if you were in Dryden Voss's gang, then yeah, it's great. You know, you've got all sorts, you know. Yeah, like Dominic said, it's like the cantina basically. Yeah, that's probably my favourite ship.
And the equipment, obviously, we're talking about characters from Star Wars Galaxy. You have the Jedi with the lightsabers, and then you have the bounty hunters. They have the coolest weaponry, regular side-on blasters, but then you have characters such as Mandalorians that have every trick of the trade, grappling hooks, jetpacks, meat, rockets, all this kind of stuff. I want to talk to you about this one, Ethan. Because you have a character named Balance, who is basically Terminator, and one of the issues, you have a complete design of every possible armament this guy could pack into his cybernetic being. What's it like playing with these characters and using all of their strengths and their gadgets like that?
Well, I also want to give a shout out to Paolo Villanelli, who is the artist that has been on both of our run, which is going on 4 years now, and he drew that schematic, which you could probably Google, and it's really cool. I think Balance's signature weapon are palm blasters, and they sort of have a couple of functions. Like, first of all, it's all like, oh, my hands are up, and then, you know, they kind of look a little bit like Iron Man's repulsor blasts. But I just, in general, I try sometimes to not have them, to sort of disarm them from time to time, so they have to get kind of close and dirty, the fights. I'm a big fan of Hong Kong action movies, so I like, you know, I have a character that I got to use named Tasso Leach, who is older, who has a fairly small part in The Force Awakens, but I kind of wanted to do a younger version, and it's been kind of a fun character to sort of to show the earlier, kind of more idealistic but ruthless version. So I have, you know, I kind of do, while I love the weapons, I do like, you know, maybe a nice vibro blade, so it's kind of, you know, a little close quarter.
And Matt, since you've read a lot of the Legends comics over the years, certain storylines anybody can jump into, certain storylines of the underworld that really come to mind when it comes to just everything with Star Wars, movies, books, games, any of that.
My favourite stuff of all the Legends comics was, there's too damn many, and I've read everything from Dark Horse onwards, and I can't remember all of it, but The Bounty on the Barracuda with Boba Fett, written by the guy who played Judge Dredd, with amazing, beautiful Cam Kennedy artwork, and they finally, after me nagging Hasbro for a long time, done the figure of that. That era, if you can pick up Alan Grant, I think it was? John Maitland, the other half of Judge Dredd, yeah. If you could pick up that story arc, there was 4 or 5 single issues of it, just brilliant. It was Cam Kennedy after he'd done Dark Empire 1 and 2, I think just after he did 1, but yeah, that story I need to go back and reread once in a while, and it's just really good stuff. And that was one of the things that really got me to bounty hunters and stuff. Just good stuff.
Oh yeah. Adam, was there any inspiration when you were creating Ochi of this film, any underworld stories, anything that you picked up from?
Not really, it's interesting. Like, Ochi is associated with a group called the Acolytes of the Beyond. But this is not really bounty hunters or Scum and Villainy. This isn't the realm of kind of cults. So there was much more of a kind of cult vibe to Ochi. Which is kind of funny. Like, he's tasked with chasing Rey by Palpatine, who seems sort of emissaries of the cult, and the Sith Eternals, another cult, to him. And instantly there's this, you know, Ochi's kind of grating against this intrusion, because he's a Sith assassin, but he's much more at home with the Scum and Villainy of the universe, which is why he goes to the cantina and starts drinking and like getting the gang back together. Cults is like a whole other subject, and he finds them kind of obviously creepy, but like something that you can't understand. And if you can't understand that, he'd probably like to just like shoot it or blow it up or something. Is any short-tempered, strange little assassin would.
What about you, Dominic? What about you for a storyline, something memorable?
Sure.
Yeah.
Thinking about the relationship between the dark side and the underworld, one of the great Clone Wars arcs is when Darth Sidious hires Cad Bane to kidnap the Force-sensitive children of the galaxy. And I feel like in some ways, we can in-universe headcanon our way to that being kind of a precursor to Ochi and that whole idea of Palpatine needing somebody with a foot in that world to accomplish his goals. And there's nobody better than Cad Bane, and you get this terrific roller coaster of an arc of, the Jedi trying to take down someone who is funded by their ultimate enemy and is able to outthink them and be one step ahead of them the whole way along until they basically have to, break their own code, go against their own morals, and Anakin, Mace, and Obi-Wan all have to, work together to get inside Bane's mind, and it's a really sort of horrific scene where you can tell this character that we're not supposed to like, we start to sympathize with him because he's going, get out of my head, get out of my head. And, you see the failings of the Jedi. Palpatine inadvertently kind of exposed them as the frauds that they are in that storyline. So, again, that sort of interesting relationship that the dark side has with the underworld. They complement each other, even if they don't quite always line up in terms of what their goals are.
Mm-hmm. I like the fact that the Empire thinks very highly of themselves, but they still end up getting the help of bounty hunters to just do what they need to get done. They go out there and they deal with these people. They don't really like dealing with, as we see Empire Strike Back, bounty hunter scum, but whatever means is necessary. So at this point, if you guys want to come up, we're going to do a little Q&A. Tell us your favorite bounty hunter, and you could ask us anything. To be fair, you can just within reason, don't ask about any current things that the authors are writing about.
You can ask, but
we have Lando, Aphra, plenty others. Why is it that they seem to fall in the underworld and not, your Empire, your Rebels, the other factions?
okay. Well, first of all, let me compliment you on your name. And secondly, I think, look, there are LGBTQ plus characters elsewhere as well. And I can just speak from personal experience. We get to explore that a little bit more in books like Bounty Hunters and Aphra.
Yeah, it's what I've been loving.
Well, thank you. And I think part of it is because, I kind of feel like the sort of the cosmic battle storylines, you don't get to necessarily develop some of those characters in the same way because there's like the emphasis is on a sort of large, a battle that sort of dwarfs everything else. So I kind of feel like we can get a little bit deeper sometimes because, these are characters that sort of, it's more about them. I don't know if I'm articulating this well enough.
No, that makes sense, yeah.
So that's just my opinion. And by the way, just while I can, I want to shout out, we also have Mark Guggenheim here, writer of Han Solo and Chewbacca from Marvel. Underworld and Scum and Villainy. No, he's...
You would have been first.
Thank you.
Hello. Hi, I'm Hayden. I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in the United States.
I'm Austin from Philly. I'm from New Jersey.
From New Jersey.
Oh,
sweet.
Awesome, man.
All right, so one character I wanted to see more of was Dirge from the 2005 Clone Wars show. For those who haven't watched it, go ahead and watch it. It's very good. What are some characters you wish you would see more on the screen or in other forms of Star Wars?
Well, first of all, there was an issue of Dr. Aphra that featured Dirge. Did you read that?
I didn't read that. I told you about this recently.
Did you?
know that, right? Like within the past month.
Well,
Come to the Marvel panel on Monday. That's all I
okay.
have to say.
Easy.
Oh,
We should do that.
Sorry, I was distracted by the George question. What was the actual question?
Yeah. What is some characters you want to see more of that's featured in like Underworld things?
Easy, Dash Red Dog.
Good.
Anybody else have a character that wants to come back
I'd
from
like to
Legends?
see more Dash Randall. Bring in more Dash Randall.
Yes.
I mean, it's sort of difficult because I feel like so many of them have come back and all of the sort of wonderful storytelling that's been going on. So I'm looking to the prequel era, and I think about Aura Singh, and I know she's been pushed to her death, and I know she had a lot of storylines in Legends, but that's a character that I feel like is due for a comeback someday, some way, somehow.
I picked Jodo Cast. I mean, he hasn't featured in much, but he was a Boba Fett wannabe and tried to be Boba Fett and then got caught by Boba Fett. But yeah, that's what you could bring back and do something with.
I mean, I was thinking, linking on to what we were talking about earlier with Sarge Ventress and more like a more standalone movie, live action.
Yes.
And looking at how he manages the Shadow Collective, like what sort of things he gets them doing. What is his relationship like with Crimson Dawn, Black Sun, Pikes, and really following on from the amazing solo panel that was here not long ago. I mean, there's no solo 2 either. Like that solo film ended, and we see more in hologram, and then that's it. What a tease, and then you don't get a follow-up. So I think that could be a great story to really go down. You can tell I'm writing.
I like that idea. Anyone else? No?
Hey, with John Garrison as well. I grew up with Boba Fett as well, watching episode 5, so nothing to add on this side. But it also made me, in the end, build this costume for the 501st. But my question rather goes on, we've heard on a lot of great character design and character development, especially through later episodes and really adding to them. But when we watch the last episodes of The Mandalorian and you see a certain pirate captain for the Corsair, you feel like it's a mix of, old stereotypes just mixed together. We don't see enough of that character. How do you feel about this? Is this a corporate thing maybe, or how do you feel about this in character design?
Is this for the recent episode?
Yeah, the recent ones. So you see that Corsair captain, so it looks like if put names to it, like a mix of Pizza Hut from Spaceballs and Davy Jones.
Spaceballs, that's
yeah, it was Spaceballs.
Yeah. He needs a mini, doesn't he?
So,
so it's these kind of characters that I think a lot of people are like, oh, that's a dumb character, like it's a waste of a character. But then I look back at it, and Star Wars has many of these kind of characters that think they're third grade and they're so powerful and they get knocked down a peg so easily. And I think that's the charm of Star Wars, is you got to have like these little mini bosses, if you will, to kind of flesh things out. But I mean, I enjoyed the portrayal of the character. I thought it was a different design, a very cool design. I always like when we're seeing the new species introduced in the Star Wars.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, like Star Wars, the galaxy is huge. And like we always cheer when we recognize whatever alien species on Navarro or Tatooine or whatever. So when something new comes along, it's sometimes a surprise, but like it shouldn't be, because it's kind of cool. Like, the galaxy is so big, there's loads of planets we haven't been to, and sort of things we haven't seen. I have to admit I'm behind on the Mandalorian. No spoilers. I saw the episode where he appears, but I know he's in the more recent one. I look forward to it.
I think, and tell me if you agree with me on this, like, a lot of times when I'm writing Star Wars, you try not to keep falling back on the same alien species all the time. Like, you know, like, oh, it's another Twilight or another Rodian. You know, you want to mix it up. It is a big galaxy, as that says.
Yeah. I don't know if you have this in comics, but like in the book side, we have this kind of syndrome, like small galaxy syndrome, where like if you're, you can, in a book you use existing characters and materials and places, but you don't want to overdo it, because, oh, it's a Rodian, oh, it's a Twi'lek, oh, it's, whatever. So you really kind of have to branch out, and we call it small galaxy syndrome, because it's like, well, suddenly everyone knows each other, and the galaxy becomes such a small place. Which we couldn't before.
Yeah, sometimes we try. Sometimes we should avoid and we don't. Because I always like to put like a little Easter egg or
Well,
something.
you want to mix it up. So
Yeah, exactly.
You want to cheer when your favourite species appears, or favourite character, or planet, or whatever, but also to balance that with original stuff. It's interesting in Mandalorian that they went that way with the Pirate Captain, because it is so different to what we've seen in Star Wars.
Yeah.
And your initial reaction is like, well, it doesn't fit, but the galaxy's huge. So we're not caught up.
I mean, there was a giant praying mantis in the cantina. Ron Cobb designed a big jellyfish thing for the cantina that came back in the comics years later. You've got, was it Rebels? I think it was Rebels. There was a big tarantula, pirate captain or villain captain. You know,
Mantis is in
it all adds to the mix.
Mandalorian.
Yeah.
All right.
Loads of
Thank you.
stuff.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tim from Ireland. Just a quick question, Ethan. Firstly, I want to say really enjoying Bounty Hunters. Thank you. And I'm just wondering, you kind of touched on it earlier. You were talking about crossovers in terms of like the big crossover events, but also kind of other characters showing up in Bounty Hunters. I was just wondering if you could speak maybe a bit more into like how those crossovers and things are organised and how they kind of.
Well, it's all led from the editors. We have a weekly Zoom meeting, and it is my favorite time of the week. We basically are paid to daydream, but we share ideas. We all know where our stuff is going, and I think we also have the luxury of essentially, a very relatively small number of titles, so that we can, and the last year and change, it's been a big crossover essentially. So we've had to. And it's been tricky because there are times when the same scene is played. Like I remember in Bounty Hunters, there was this scene where Valance and Din Djarin ambush Boba Fett, and Charles was writing the main event series, but we got to it first, and the artist was Paulo was drawing around that scene because we weren't 100% sure how it was going to be staged in the main. So it got kind of tricky because it was essentially the same scene shot from different points of view. So that there are times when it does get tricky, but we're always talking. And Charles especially has been great about, during this process, talking through what he thinks and listening to, he wants everyone to be involved to that larger storyline. So, it's really about the communication and the fact that we talk every week. We know what's going on.
Thanks, you.
Hi, my name's Dan from South West England. I've got to say, favourite bounty hunter is Embo.
I thought there was an Embo in the back. Is there an Embo still in the back? Okay.
Hey, nice.
Don't throw your hat.
I just think it's cool. Which character would you most like to see turn into a life of crime?
A life of crime?
Right.
Come on.
Put on the spot here.
I'm just imagining this kind of Elseworlds, alt-universe Star Wars storyline with Yoda and Rey.
Oh yeah. And Grogu was their sidekick.
Grogu's the boss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple of years older, a bit wiser.
Luke Skywalker, why not? Easy choice, the goody two-shoes. Let's see what he's going to do with the power of the Force.
Even more so, Obi-Wan Kenobi, the most uptight character, especially in the prequel era. Throw him into a life of crime and see how he handles it. I think that would be a lot of fun.
Thanks. Thank you. To end the panel, we're going to do a little fun game here with all of our panelists. We have under 5 minutes according to this clock. We are going to name as many underworld characters. They are. I will just moderate. We're going to go through a line and just go through name every possible underworld
I
character.
can't remember the name of the characters in my own book.
It's going to go on for a long time or not very long.
This is a drinking game without the actual drinks. Chris was the first person to stumble.
All right, we're gonna. You got the first crack on this one, Ciaran. I'll give you guys like 3 seconds to think of something.
God, that's not a lot.
Okay, Embo.
5 seconds.
4.
Of course, Din Djarin.
Boba Fett.
Cad Bane.
Jodie Cast.
Zukas.
Jango. Dragon Boss.
Have we said Dengar yet?
Yes.
But you can never say Dengar enough. Tobias Beckett.
IG-88.
No.
Have you seen Boss?
Two.
No.
Zero the Hutt.
Jabba the Hutt.
Brief Cargo.
No.
Oh, me. I just said Jabba the Hutt, so.
This is already gone off the rails.
I'm very confused.
Yes, this is A+ game.
All of
I
a
thought you
minute and a
beat
half.
me.
Also, I didn't mention the wonderful character of Dr. Aphra. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge this awesome, powerful character in the Star Wars universe that is basically Indiana Jones in the Star Wars galaxy and has huge, pivotal roles to play currently.
Can I plug something really quickly? Alyssa Wong, the writer of Dr. Aphra, among other many wonderful stories, Mark Guggenheim, and myself will be signing at the Forbidden Planet booth tomorrow at 11 a.m. 11 a.m. So, speaking of Dr. Aphra, Alyssa, they will be there tomorrow, so you can have your Dr. Aphra copies signed. If you don't have Dr. Aphra copies, this is your chance to correct that. Horrible, like
All Volume 2 stuff, she's done a great job on it. And it's writing Deadpool at the moment as well, having good fun.
Yeah, they're writing Deadpool as well.
And do you have any book signings this weekend? Anything going on?
Tomorrow actually at 5:30 is the Lucasfilm Publishing panel, which will be exciting. Always is. Twin Suns the stage. I'm signing it, I think, 4 o'clock. Yeah.
And the Marvel panel is Monday, correct?
Correct.
There's some reveals there, aren't there?
There will be reveals.
And a press release, there's some reveals.
There are reveals. Don't ask me anything else. I tend to make mistakes in station position.
Dirge.
Alrighty, so that's going to wrap it up for Bounty Hunters, Smugglers, and Gangsters, Scum and Villainy through the years. I want to thank everybody for joining us. I want to thank for our bodyguard over there, Din Djarin, for watch. For choosing our panel here. It means a lot.
Also, can we say thank you for Chris Abbott for organising all of this?
Thanks for checking out the video. Please hit that thumbs up symbol. It helps me know that I'm making content that you guys enjoy. And if you enjoyed this video, I also included 2 videos down below you guys should check out. And please consider subscribing to this channel. It helps support me and it notifies you guys of when I get new videos up on the channel. You can also contact me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Starrapter.